We made it, Matt. We're live. Yeah,
Awesome. All
yeah,
right.
yeah. So,
Yeah, I
so
appreciate it.
the music here is When I Get There by All of the Miles. We're just chilling out and relaxing for a little bit. Turn the music down just a little bit. Hey, I just want to take an opportunity to thank all the supporters of formerforce.com and Joe Benson and I and what we've been endeavoring to do. The idea is to get the stories of our heroes, right, while they're still alive. It all started with a master rated jump master buddy of mine who got sick. And I was like, we got to get your stories told, man. Let's sit around the campfire and tell the stories. And so we're doing it now while we're still alive. Tonight, I have a special kind of a guest in relationship not only with this person, but with this position of the person. So tonight will be special, right? Our master rated donors, thank you very much. Williams, Jackman, Calderon, Evans, Cobos, Wino, Ridgeway. Our senior rated donors, Newton, Diaz, Shrum, Fernandez, Kirkendall, Allen. Our newest basic donor, King, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We appreciate all of our donors. Our donors, you know, it's just Joe and I. We're not millionaires, and we're trying to pay the bills and get these coins and things out. And if you don't know what we're doing, I guess let me take an opportunity to tell you. You know, this is the idea is to get our stories told, and we put them on this thumb drive right here. And Colonel Jamison and I are going to tell stories tonight, and we're going to tell stories about a storied air defense unit, one that he is currently the commander of. And again, I get sentimental, but I've chosen 0034 for my coin. That's how much that means to me, right? I stood at the gap like these guys are standing now. And I apologize, but it does. It means a lot. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for your support. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we're relaxing, you know, when I get there. So I prepared a tissue. I knew I was going to cry. I knew it. I just knew it. I just knew it, sir. So, hey, thanks for being here with me. I appreciate it, sir. We're going to have such a good time tonight, right? You're the old man now, right?
I
Oh,
am.
my gosh.
I don't see myself that way, Will, and it's hard. So no joke. Just today, I am I'm making a copy of my airborne certificate, right? And I've got my rear deck commander there, Captain Michelle Harris, and I show her, and I'm like, just to kind of show you, you know, how old I am, right? I slid this thing across the desk to her, and she laughs and she looks at me and she says, "I was in fifth grade then." Right. That's when I completed airborne school when one of my commanders was in fifth grade. And that really hits home, you know, when you think about it like that, right?
Right, right. So I remember you as a young, fiery-eyed lieutenant who had skills like crazy, and just smarts. And weren't you the Ranger PT leader and stuff for your class and stuff?
I was definitely doing Ranger PT. I was all excited to go and conquer the world and all that. And man, this it brings a lot of memories back. You know, that was a lot of fun doing that. But you know, probably a little overconfident in those days too. You know.
Oh yeah, right. So it's interesting those times, right? And for a lot of it, it blurs with me. But I would love, as we tell stories tonight, that you would tell me, some of the stories that happen in OBC and stuff. Gregory Cummins is on. He says, "Great officer right there, airborne." I agree. I
Awesome.
agree, Gregory. Yeah, and look here. I remember her as Pope, right?
Yep.
But I remember her as Pope. She's one of my heroes, right? I want to get her on. Hopefully, she'll
You
agree
should.
to come
She's
on.
got a
Yeah.
great story to tell for sure.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
She'll
She is.
appreciate that we're signing her up for duty.
Oh yeah, good. She is definitely one of those heroes that I've watched through the years. It's neat again realizing how many people that I know. Right? It's neat looking around and saying these are heroes that I know in some kind of way. Whether it's my Sunday school teacher, whether it's my mom and dad, whether it's now you. Right? You're standing in a gap at a time, in a position, and in a place that is, I don't know. It may turn out to be historied. I just don't know. And I don't want to get into that kind of thing. That's not what this is about. All right. I don't want to get into all those crazy things. But I'll tell you this: you're standing in the gap at a time where I'm glad you're there. I'm glad I know somebody that's there. Right. I'm glad I know that Colonel Holler's over there at the 94th. Right. You are people that I know. Right. I know it's cool to have General Austin up there as the SecDef or whatever he is, the big high guy, because I stood next to him and shook his freaking gigantic hand one time. It was like, golly. And smart guys, right? So, I know that our Army's in good hands with good people. Burnley's the daggone Fort Sill CSM. I
Absolutely.
mean, come on, doggone. I told Burnley he was going to be the ADA CSM when I first met him he was a brand new staff sergeant.
He couldn't have believed you then. I remember him when he was a sergeant first class, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's amazing. Amazing to see after all those years. What amazes me as we move around and as time passes in the military is, when you build relationships and then you get to the point where every time you move, there's folks there who who you didn't even know you were going to reconnect with, or you didn't even know were in that same place, right? And for us now, we're at the point where that's all over the world. It's just amazing. And I think that's one of the coolest things is, you can look at the downsides of military life and with young kids, right? It can be tough moving all the time, but those friendships that they make, we moved to DC after being Oconus for a bunch of years. And all of a sudden there were all these folks, not just who my wife and I knew, but even friends of my daughter, at that time, 10 years old. It's just amazing.
Yeah, that it is great. It's its own culture. The family of the military and the friendships and the bonds that you make. They're real and they're true, and they cross cultural and international boundaries. And there's just love to be shared all over the place with people that are ready to exhibit strength to make sure that we're peaceful, right? Right. That's what we want to do. That's what we want to do. And so I'm here with Lieutenant Colonel Matt Jamison, the current old man right now. And let me take just a minute, Matt, if I can, if you don't mind. I want to talk about what's happening just for a minute about tomorrow and the next day and so forth. Look, tomorrow is Ranger. This is the Ranger. He was going to be, think of this was when I knew him, he was a young Lieutenant Ranger in Charlie Battery, 3rd of the 4th ADA. I mean, he's retired as Lieutenant Colonel. He'll be on with us tomorrow. So stop by and check out that. I'd be honored. And then let's see. On Thursday, the one man that I think might be like my toughest interview ever. He used to be the Charlie Battery, 3rd of the 4th ADA First Sergeant. He's the guy that ordered me to go to the NCO of the Year board, like back in the 90s. The one that, I ended up becoming the Division NCO of the Year because of it. And he made me go to the board. I was like, I don't want to go. He goes, I don't care. I just don't care. You're going to the board. And I was like, what do you say? What do you say? Mm-hmm. And so he's going to be on with us on Thursday, and then we're gonna close out the week. So I'm right now here with the old man, Colonel Matt Jamison. Sir, thank you so much. So you were talking about your airborne wings. I have to ask this: are you jump master qualified?
I am not, so I know that's a bit unusual for this position. So I did manifest today. I'm jumping with the executioners tomorrow. So pretty excited to get out the door there.
Awesome.
But, it's interesting because that conversation came up. I asked to come to 3-4. I wanted to be a Sky Striker. I wore the red beret as a lieutenant, but that was in those days where 108 fell under the Corps. So even at Fort Bliss, we were wearing the red beret. We weren't jumping, of course. So this is my first opportunity to be in a unit that is actively jumping. So, it's pretty wild, but I knew the legacy and I knew the challenge, that the Sky Strikers would represent. So, I'm truly honored to be where I am today.
Amen. Well, I know it's a pie in the sky, but here's all you need to do to earn all the credibility you need to. Go get your little pre-test slip. Go down
Mhm.
there and go through the. I mean, you can always say, "Hey, my boss wouldn't let me go through the course," but I got a current slip. The minute he gives me a slot, I'm going to go down there and get my jump master certification, and then you'll be good to go. Just study a little bit on the weekends, learn pre-jump. You'll be good to go.
Well,
You'll
I
be
got
good
my
to go.
Echo Commander in there right now, so we're pushing forward. Absolutely.
Amen, amen. Yeah, Cameron Davis says white slip, baby. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a. I mean, hey, just it's a willingness, right? But you got to step forward. I remember lobbying. So there was a guy in your seat many years ago. His name was Kirk, Colonel Kirk, and we had a spout of jump master students that had gone down and failed, right? And he was mad, and he said, if you're not a staff sergeant, you're not going to jump master school without seeing me. And so here I was, 2 months, E5. I mean, E5, 2 months. And I'm in there in his office saying, sir, I want to go jump master school. And I had my pretest slip. And
Yep.
and he let me go. He said, okay. And so I went down, I became a jump master and ta-da, all that fun stuff. But you got to show that willingness. You got to get out there and go do it. So tell me about, young Matt. Where's young Matt from? Where are you from, sir?
So born in Southern California, but grew up mostly in Virginia. Lived as a single child, so I've got siblings, but all half. So never lived with any of them. Worked hard in school, played sports, went to college in Virginia, and that's where I met my wife, Risa. So that's kind of the majority of the origin story, I guess, if you will. So we're
Okay. Yeah,
essentially from Virginia.
that's cool. So we got to dig a couple details. Tell me your sport. What was it? Football?
Man, I played everything when I was in school. So I
Okay.
loved sports. I played soccer. I played baseball for years. I ended up wrestling in high school, and I loved that. So I played football for a few years, but that was never, the long term for me. I loved wrestling. When I went to college, I went to Hampton City College, real small school in Farmville, Virginia. So about 1,000 folks there, all male school. Is the note there. And so I transitioned from wrestling to rugby in college, and man, I loved it. Like
Really?
that was just it for me. That was so much fun, the camaraderie, the hard work, and the just getting yourself beat up, getting your face kicked in, and then having a couple beers and singing some songs when you're done, right? That was as good as it got right there.
So look, there's something about being on a rugby team that I think would be kind of interesting, right? It's different. You're tight, you're close, you're all together, you're all up in there, and part of the whole sport is the party, right? Isn't
Oh
that
yeah,
like built into it?
it's a big part. Yeah, you don't you don't do the rugby without the after party.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's great. That's
It makes you
great.
feel a little bit better too. All those aches and pains, kind of at least they stay at bay until the next day, right?
Right, right. You wake up the next morning you're gonna feel bad either way, right? So you might as well be
Everything hurts at
hungover
that
and
point.
hurt.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So was the Army the path for you? Did you do a ROTC or did you enlist and go OCS? I thought
No,
I saw you in OCS or something.
I was in OCS. Well, nobody would have ever told you that Matt Jamison would have ended up in the Army. So it was never the path. I didn't know what the path was. I thought I had it all figured out, when I got into college, and it turned out I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, right? So so I was a political science major in school. I thought maybe I'd go be a lawyer. I took some law classes, and they were probably my worst classes in college. I was interested. I knew I was interested in some kind of public service. So I did my internships in DC, over the summer, right? Doing that. I didn't want to do that. It was all well and good, but I didn't want to stay with that. I had, I think going along with the whole rugby thing, I had a problem with authority. So that's kind of where the Army seemed a little, out there, right? I had a really phenomenal instructor who was also the president of the college, who had a pretty tremendous impact on me in terms of, knowing that I wanted to do some form of public service, and kind of starting to figure out, what I was interested in, national security and all that. And it was General Sam Wilson. So he was the president of Hampden-Sydney College. He's noteworthy for having been a part of Merrill's Marauders. He was also the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and at one point, deputy director of Central Intelligence. So we had this guy at our small town school, who was the president of the school. He would have, young men over to his home on Sundays, for brunch, which was phenomenal. Just a phenomenal guy. And he taught us a class on national intelligence, and it was so fascinating, right? Like everybody wanted this class, and, he'd get to the point of the class and he'd say, okay, pens down, and he'd just start telling stories, right? And his life was full of, these kind of wild stories, right? Here I was behind, Russian lines, and, this and that and the other thing happened, right? And just an amazing guy. And incidentally, you'll know Colonel Boyer, who went to Hampden-Sydney, and you'll probably know also General Stewart, who also went to Hampden-Sydney. Both of them knew each other and played football there. And so, I had no idea who they were, obviously, when I was going through school, but just an interesting kind of, factoid, I guess, at this point, right?
Wow.
But so Sam Wilson just had a tremendous impact. And, I knew at that point I was interested in intelligence. I didn't know that the Army was the route. And then September 11th happened while I was starting my senior year of college. And, gosh, I mean, I felt that kind of as I was saying it, right? That was a huge, impactful event, for me. And I think that started, making me think about it. And it wasn't until I actually finished college, that I decided that, that the Army was the route that I wanted to go. So, I knew I wanted to do some form of service, and I was still trying to figure it out even after I graduated. So I obviously no ROTC, or anything. And I finally decided, it was time to just go for it. And, I did my board. I went to Beckley, West Virginia, so I could board for going to OCS. And, after I finally shipped off, I think it was June of 2003, I finally shipped off from Richmond. And 6 months later, I commissioned as an officer. So pretty wild to go from, who I was and where I was to that point. No, like I said, nobody would ever seen it coming. And,
Wow.
My wife would be the first to tell you that she was blown away when I told her what I decided I was going to do.
So you were married when you decided to do it?
So we were not. We
Okay.
had started. So we started dating on September 1st, 2001. So we
Oh,
were
wow.
newly together, at that time, and then we married while I was a lieutenant. Um,
Wow.
but yeah, she was shocked. She supported me fully then, just as she does now. Yeah, but it was pretty shocking. And again, if you knew me in college, the captain of the rugby team, and a guy who didn't always play well with others. I probably play a little bit better with others now. But yeah, so that
Oh my gosh, that's great. So here you go. Oh, officer basic course. All of a sudden, you show up at officer basic course. That's where I meet you. You were in Captain Lee and I's class, right? Or were you in another class?
So actually, my SGI was Lopsick. Tim Lopsick was.
Oh, you in Burnley?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
And Canada, maybe was it Leipzig in Canada or Leipzig in Burnley?
Burnley.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Cannon was there as well. I remember him well.
Oh yeah.
It was everybody. I think we got passed around, but I think probably my most vivid memory there is Tim Lopsick throwing erasers at people who were dozing off in his class. Right. That's one of the things that most sticks out. But the story that I actually still tell now from there is not that. It's man, I can't remember for the life of me who this captain was. But the story I tell all my commanders and my platoon leaders is we had a captain instructor, and I don't remember for the life of me what the class was. It's irrelevant to the story. But she told us, she said, when you take command, you have to be prepared to lose a paycheck when you change out because you're going to have property issues, right? You're going to have flippals, you're going to lose stuff. So just be prepared to give up a paycheck. And I'm thinking at the time, man, this is a terrible sales presentation, right? Like, who's going to want to do that? Who wants to give up, a month's worth of pay? Like, this is not enticing, right? And of course, the way I use that as a lesson, of course, is why don't you just do it right the first time instead of forfeiting a month's pay, right?
Oh
That's
yeah.
a story that has stuck with me from all that time. I will never forget that captain. I want to say it was like Irvin, if that rings a bell. But
I think I know exactly who you're talking about. I
yeah,
think I know
that one
exactly who you're
stuck
talking
with
about.
me for sure. And that probably wasn't the intent, but it may not have been the desired effect, but it worked.
One of the things that so I came into Patriot as an outsider, right?
Yeah.
So I was
Tough,
an
dude.
outsider completely. So when I got to Patriot, one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of people didn't even really knew what they didn't even know what they had. It was like they would open up the Connex and you'd point to something and you go, "What is that?" And they go, "Well, um, uh, that belongs to the section over there," and you go, and it's like you start just yanking stuff out, and nobody really knows what's on the equipment list and what's off and what was left over from somebody else. And I mean, I learned that lesson as a private when I had a battalion commander, a guy like you, that come down there and said, "Why have excess stuff? Let's put it back in the bigger pile and let it be for everybody instead of hoard it up here, hidden in the back that nobody can ever get to. But then when we deploy, we're not going to be able to do what we need to do because you're going to have all this crazy stuff in there." And once it was like, "Oh, that's why we have packing lists. That's why we have load plans. That's why we don't hide stuff in the back for the rainy day. We use what we're supposed to." And that's why the Army works the way it does. And, oh, okay. But it takes lessons like that. So thank you for being the old man and teaching lessons like that, you
Yeah.
know?
Another one I was telling one of the commanders recently, and this just goes to your point about just knowing what we have, is my memory about supply. So first of all, they don't teach you that in school, right? Like, we focus on all this important stuff, but the stuff that's really going to get you hemmed up, doesn't get taught well in school to this day. And that's why it's important, I think, to have those kind of conversations. But I remember that the manuals for the Patriot systems were so bad. There weren't, like, even the appropriate manuals, so people knew what they were looking at when they did inventories, right? And we had this thing. Do you know the pig?
Yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
the pig, the Patriot End Item Guide? Like, we didn't have
Yeah.
full TMs, right, that everyone else uses. We had to, like, look on computer disks to find, like, the right things. And nobody, of course, now when you talk about the pig, nobody knows what you're talking about. It's all changed over time. But I just
Oh,
remember
yeah.
it was like getting a classified brief or something, right? Like, until someone gave you this, you just weren't even looking at the right stuff. You weren't playing the right game, right?
Right. And so that's where it was a culture of it's like if it's in the Connex there, if it's not in the Connex, I don't know that we fell off the truck anywhere, so just charge me for it. If that you're gonna yell at me, then charge me for it because I didn't know what I had when I got here. And look, if you know as well as I do, if you don't do a good change of command inventory when you take command, which was a culture at one point in our army, then shame on you at the end, right?
Yeah.
But
Oh, you would hear about people with, that strange guy with $1 million flipple,
yeah, yeah.
Whoa.
Oh, Gregory Cummins says, hope to hear some 5.5 Deuce stories. Were you in the Deuce?
I absolutely was. I did my battery command time in 5.5.2. Good old then Colonel Greg Brady. So yeah, we'll
Oh,
get
wow.
some good stories in there for sure.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, tell me about being a lieutenant. Do you have a lost lieutenant story or being confused? Or was the Army transition
Lost lieutenant
easy?
story. The best lieutenant story I will give you, and this you want to talk about the sort of eye-opening, like I think this was one of those just eye-opening moments for me. Like, okay, you know, the way I am perceived is not necessarily how I want to be perceived, and the line between like confidence and cockiness is maybe a little too fuzzy, for me at this time. And I knew coming in that I didn't have all the answers, right? I
Right.
spent 6 months to become a commissioned officer. I didn't do ROTC. I didn't go to West Point. There's a lot of stuff I didn't learn, and I knew that. But I felt pretty comfortable that I had a lot of leadership experience and things that were going to help me get off to a good start. But I remember in OBC we had a PT session, and there was a major there participating who was working. I think he was in the schoolhouse at the time. And gosh, I can't think of his last name right now for the life of me. I can picture his face still to this day. And I remember his father had been a general officer. He ended up transitioning, I think, to another branch or something maybe, but then he ended up getting out. I'm sure it'll come to me later. But anyway, so we're doing some kind of crazy PT session. I think we were doing, the kickoff for PRT or whatever it was at that point, right? And he was like screwing up everything, that the NCO PT instructor was telling him. And it's blackout, and I have no idea who it is, but they're just, falling over their feet every which way. And I said some stupid remark and probably called him an idiot, right? And man, that was the first time, and there haven't been too many more since, where I just got dressed down. Like he took me aside or brought me in at some point, and man, he just berated me. And I was like, okay, I get it. I got it. Gotta watch it. Gotta adjust a little bit, right? So that was an important moment, I think, for me.
Oh, well, look, it's a big deal in front of a group of people for that kind of thing, right? You embarrass somebody in front of their buddies, and there's I don't know if you realize this, but there's a lot of testosterone in our business, right?
You
Right?
think?
Yeah, a lot of testosterone, and you can be it doesn't matter what gender you can have a lot of testosterone, and so yeah. Hey, look, Felipe Platucci, he's a race car driver, man. He's looking in. I love you, man. And Benson, my partner, says, hello, team. Look, let me tell you guys about Joe Benson. Joe Benson designed the coins and the T-shirts and the shirts and stuff, and he's the guy that ships the stuff out, does this the behind the scenes, him and his beautiful wife and family. And Joe Benson was one of my superstars. I identified him. He was a brand new private, came into my unit when I was a first sergeant, and I identified him very quickly as a superstar, and he's been a superstar ever since. And hey, let's take a moment, sir, and share your video. Let's do this. This is a good break for this. Let's watch this. This is the tribute video I made for you. I feel it's like the Beauty and the Beast, but there's no beast. Just two of y'all beautiful people.
You give me the beast on that one. Quite sweet.
If everything I dreamt of learning was
take your blessings with your heartaches too. It's so easy and so wonderful to know it's you. From the highest mountain to the deepest well, I never thought I'd be the one to tell. It's so easy and so wonderful beneath your spell. Bright is the shadow that my true love casts. Dark is the light he shares. If I could only have one more night, I'd forgive him, I swear. I swear. I swear.
That was the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor.
Oh, I love it.
So
It was
come on,
awesome.
let's make this blue moon shine all day. Let's make this world do everything you say. It's so easy and so wonderful to feel this way, to feel this way.
I heard that music. So I use a service called Artlist.io that gives me streamable original real music.
Yeah.
So that isn't some canned something. That is that's something that your donations get us is some real stuff that we can use. And that I just saw yours. I'm like, I'm making a Disney show, this one. And so that's it. The Beauty and the Beast. Thanks for being here. I'm here with the old man, Colonel Matt Jamison. Golly, what an amazing guy. So tell me about, becoming a captain and then, being a commander and you were a Patriot commander, right?
I was. So it's interesting, this was sort of the older days with command where you could stay in command for a lot longer, than you can now. So I had 4 years of command, which was most of my captain time.
Oh, wow.
And I had two different commands. So I commanded a Patriot battery, and then I commanded an infantry company, which was pretty awesome. Just really, really good experience for me. So going into to my Patriot command, I was fortunate enough. I worked at 32nd. I was General Fran Mann's aide. After coming back from Korea, and it was great experience. I think just before going into command to learn from somebody like that, a senior leader in the branch, and just kind of get the big picture a little bit, right, and understand like what are the senior leaders looking for. But the other thing it did for me is gave me the opportunity to kind of pinpoint where I wanted to go, right. And so I worked worked with Colonel Joe D'Antona, was the chief of staff at 32nd at that time, right? One of our sort of godfathers, right?
Right.
And so he was going from there to take command of 11th Brigade, and I said, I can go anywhere I want, right? It was kind of hard not to go to a place like Germany, but I said, Colonel D'Antona is taking command of 11th Brigade, and this battalion's going to get ready to deploy, 552. I said, that's where I want to be. And so that's what I did. So I went down and, said, I'd like to go to 552. And, after the career course, that's where I ended up. And Colonel Brady, showed up, gosh, within a month of me, I think, we were gearing up. We thought we were deploying in, gosh, I think it was like February. And then we get pulled out of the field in an FTX in, I think it was August at that time. So we're out in the field, and my battery gets the call, hey, you got to come back. And so we get spun up to go forward. And I think at that time maybe we ended up going in October, but it was a pretty quick turn, from where we were. And of course, I guess spinning back a little bit, while I was still at 32nd, we're talking 2006, Doha Asian Games, and that's when we start back with the Patriot deployments, right? So part of the headquarters deployed, and of course, I think it was 343 at the time. Brian Dunn, they deployed, and so so fast forward to us, we get pulled right out of the field, and they say, hey, you're gearing up to go. I had a PowerPoint brief from 11th Brigade, and I had an RCENT order, and that is what I got to spin me up to go down range. And so Will, this is what I've always loved and kind of felt like where I thrived was, just kind of getting a little bit of information and going and figuring it out, right? And so for me, and this goes well with probably my previous sentiments about authority, is just going and just doing the best you can and making things work, and doing what you think is right until somebody tells you you're wrong. And that was my approach to command, as a battery commander was, our battery was forward deployed. We had a slice of the headquarters, like a TAC basically. And we had a slice of the maintenance company. We went to Bahrain, but otherwise we're just alone and unafraid. Like we got there, and I said, okay, we got to do force protection because we're, unlike everybody else, that's deployed there at that time. We're not on a base at all. We're off kind of adjacent to a BDF, a Bahrain Defense Force base. It's like, okay, we don't have enough people to do what's expected of us, right? I had 80 soldiers at the time, which is kind of unheard of now, for us. But say, hey, we need some more folks, and reach back to the battalion and say, hey, I really need some help. And so we got augmented from across the battalion because everyone else wasn't deployed. My wife was my FRG leader, and she was awesome. I mean, she was tremendously value added, working full time, no kids yet at that point. But she got to the point of going door to door and, just trying to support our families. And, we're incorporating all these new folks, but their units aren't deployed, and she's bringing them into the fold. And it was really a team effort. It was awesome. And great experience, from my end. I mean, I loved it. And then the rest of the battalion ended up coming forward. Probably about 6 months later, I think, give or take. But that was just a fantastic experience. Another name you'll know, Sonny Thompson was the S3 at that point, right? Major Thompson, and he was a phenomenal influence for me. I learned a lot from him, and he. Just for everyone else who doesn't know him, I mean, just picture this large Samoan, super intimidating, right? Like whether he tries to be or not, but he used it to his advantage, right? And he had these big bear paws, right? And he would come up and he just put this bear paw on your shoulder, just have that talk with you. And he had a couple of those talks with me, and one that I try to share with the team now is trying to take off the blinders. And, I've just been doing quarterly counselings recently for the commanders. Right. And one of the things I talked to them about is sort of that transition from company grade to field grade, and being able to support the rest of the team. And it's a change in your mind state, your frame of mind, I think. So, as a new commander, you're always focused down and in. You have to be, right, to make sure that your unit is doing well, is doing the things you're supposed to be. But as you start to be successful, that's the time to kind of look around you and take stock of what your brothers and sisters are doing, and kind of help, raise them up as well. And that's think that was the biggest thing that I got from Sonny. Was kind of that perspective. Trying to help out my teammates and not just being focused on, we're really good, we're the best, and that's all that matters, right?
Amen. Amen. One of our master rated donors, Craig Evans, says, "Hi team, first to fire." He's he works up there at the big house, managing personnel and people and stuff like that. He was my first soldier. I love him. He's an amazing guy. Yeah. So we're here tonight with the Colonel, Matt Jamison. Sir, thanks for being here with us. What was it like, all alone and unafraid, taking this weapon system across the world? I mean, did you like, salute the family and, go off to war? And, tell me about that experience.
Oh, so I love the idea of doing something different, right? And that's kind of always, as I look back, I feel like that's what I've always wanted, was just doing something different, and I think, a lot of what we do, you kind of fall in on existing systems or processes or, rotations or whatever it is. But I saw it as just a new challenge, and man, we had a great team, and I certainly don't take all the credit for that. I mean, we had just phenomenal leaders and a lot of continuity. I was thinking about it recently. So Greg Dowdell was my first sergeant. And he was my first sergeant for the entire time, right? We were together for 2 years. We had a bunch of lieutenants who were new at the start, and we added some new ones, but we lost very little. We had some phenomenal platoon sergeants, guys like Josh Vance, who, made sergeant first class and then switched over to become a warrant officer, who's one of the great ones in the branch now. Other guys who didn't stay around as long, but just really a phenomenal team. Great officers, NCOs. I just got one recently, as the launcher platoon sergeant now in one of my batteries, Sergeant First Class Cardwell, who I remember as PB2 Cardwell, from that battery, right? And just it's so cool to see that. And I don't see that, frankly, a lot, here at Bragg, because that doesn't seem to be, folks run in circles, right? The Bragg folks, this, the folks who have been Sky Strikers come back, right? You got a lot of people who have always kind of run in that circle. Not always the case for the 11th Brigade folks, right? If you're 108, you might stay there. But so it was great to see somebody come out, and I'm kind of looking at him as I'm talking during the newcomers brief. I'm like, man, this guy looks really familiar. I got to know him from somewhere. And then he grabbed me up at the end. I was like, man, that's awesome. Thanks for reaching out. That's pretty cool to see folks succeed like that.
So who did you look up to? You already mentioned a bunch of names already, but who were your mentors that you looked up to? Do you remember specific ones as a captain, that you were looking to?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I still talk to General Mann. In fact, we talked about a week ago. Unfortunately, I just missed him. He was actually out here as a senior mentor for our brigade external evaluation. But still keep in touch with him. Colonel D'Antona was a tremendous influence for me. Just a really phenomenal leader. I moved on. So I told you I'll kind of fast forward and come back, but I moved on to 3rd Brigade 1st Armor after my battery command. And so then Colonel Cavoli was my brigade commander, now General Cavoli, commander of U.S. Army Europe and Africa. And he is, without a doubt, the smartest person I've ever worked for. I mean, just brilliant, thinks and speaks in lists, really a phenomenal leader. And he said to me of Colonel D'Antona that he wished he could develop leaders as well as him. And that to me was just such a telling statement. Like, here you've got this tremendously impressive, clearly fast-tracked, infantry colonel, right? I mean, and this guy made, he went from 06 in command of my brigade to, 4-star general in like 10 years, which is just amazing to me. And for him to talk about, one of our own like that, that was pretty significant. So, so certainly those were right up there. Obviously working for Colonel Brady was great, and still have some opportunities to engage with him, as well. So, those folks certainly stick out. Sonny Thompson, as I said, just was a tremendous influence. And from that time moving forward, there's a lot of new folks, but I think those were the ones, who really stuck out to me in those days, who I kept in touch with, for a long time. And of course, since then, I've had the opportunity to work for a lot of other tremendous leaders, Major General Gainey, who just came down to see us 2 weeks ago now, did an LPD for us, guys like him, guys like, Colonel Scott Dellinger, there's a whole bunch more. And I think it's not just the folks you work for too, there's peers, who I've really respected highly and kept in touch with and tried to bounce ideas off of as well. And, I've had the great fortune to work with some, tremendous, other officers and NCOs and warrant officers. And we haven't even scratched the surface on those,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Man, like Phil Adams, was heavily, involved in my training as a lieutenant. And I was blessed to have him, make me into the tactician who I was. Chris Efaw, good friend, was right there at the same time. So, I worked with some awesome folks.
So did you, as a lieutenant, did you go to a Patriot unit and have to table 8 in the van and all that stuff?
I did, yeah. So I went to 1-7, off the bat, and we were gearing up right away to go to Korea. And so at that time, one of the challenges always for what we do is crew integrity. When you have a mission like that, when you have a true operational mission, right? And right. So in Korea, when they were doing individual replacement, you had folks changing out all the time, and there was no way to keep the crews together. And so, they started doing these like full battery deployments to Korea. And so they picked up and moved all the batteries from 1-7 to go to the 2 separate battalions, at the time that were there. And so that was interesting. I mean, it kept us all together and kept that crew integrity. So, I worked with the same crew in the van for 15, 18 months. And we got to be really good at our job with a pretty high op tempo.
Oh yeah. I was involved in the same thing. My unit, when I was a first sergeant, we got picked to go over there with 2-1 ADA, and moved the whole unit over there and spent 2 years together. It was really awesome.
Yeah. So Will, we got to talk about Gwangju, man.
Oh my gosh, Gwangju, God! Like so.
Have you been anywhere that awesome, in the rest of your career?
So let me tell you my Gwangju story, which is very little, right? When I went down there, we just deployed at our wartime position, and we were down there just long enough to table 8, and then we turned around and came back. We weren't stationed there like you were. You were stationed there. They had just moved us.
Rock Air Force Base.
Oh, wow. So take an opportunity to tell about the myriad of things to do in and around Gwangju.
The list is small, brother. The list is really small. So at that time, first of all, you weren't allowed to have a car there. So, Korea tends to be known for folks having these beater cars that they pay next to nothing for, or they just hand over right to the next person. We couldn't have a car. You're isolated. You're on this, it's an Air Force base, but it's not like a U.S. Air Force base. It's pretty slim pickings. There were protests at the gate weekly. So you had all kinds of times where you couldn't go out. The best you could hope for was a long weekend to hop on a bus to Osan, which is where my good buddy Rob Ferryman was, and I would try to get out there once in a while and see him, but those times were few and far between. So.
Oh wow! So you were down on Guangzhou. So no, I never got to experience that. Right after y'all, I guess we maybe replaced y'all. Maybe I don't really remember. But so we go over there, and we were the first rotation that didn't have to go get stationed at Guangzhou. We got stationed at Carroll, but we were there for only a few weeks, and we had to go to Guangzhou and certify and make that our wartime position and all that and learn, all that stuff. And
So Guangzhou was so bad. So then I think it was General Campbell, who was then the 8th Army commander. He came down and let me see, the roof had blown off the barracks in a storm, right? We lived and worked, in the same buildings, but adjacent to where our offices were, the enlisted barracks were just terrible. So the roof had come off. I think they wanted or needed to condemn it. I think his wife was with him. They might have come at like Thanksgiving or something, and I think it was fairly. I don't know if embarrassing is the right word. I mean, it just was what it was, right? But they were unimpressed, we'll say, with the amenities and conditions. So the other thing, the really sad thing, was, you're obviously familiar with the AIP, where folks can stay, in Korea for an extra year for added incentive, right? And one of our soldiers died in a storm. There was a lightning storm. You might know that, yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
We came home. There was a storm on the tax site. This kid got I don't know. They were trying to hold down a tent, I think it was, and one of the launcher dogs, got struck by lightning, and so I was there with so I was the fire control platoon leader, and our launcher platoon leader, who you probably know from 3-4 days, was James Compton. So we went way back. Yeah. So man, that was so tragic, and just, of all the things that you don't expect to happen.
I had forgotten about that, but yeah, now, because we were the next unit over there, I remember us having to do lightning protocols. You know how everything over adjusts and everything. Yeah. It was a freak crazy thing. I don't know that there was anything you could prevent, but yeah, we went through lightning protocols, and we had to do lightning briefings, and you know how that works.
Yeah.
It's Guangzhou. Yeah, that was a remote place to be stationed at, way out in. So yeah, so y'all, you had to have a favorite. So was it Yakimandu your favorite, or did you like?
Yeah, Yakimandu was really good. The cheesy ramen, of course, was good. There were a few of those treats that we got. Less high on the favorite list would be the ammo bowls.
Oh yeah, ooh man, you wake up the next morning feeling pickled. Soju gets you.
So my other lasting memory from there. So the battalion commander and the battery commanders, would do their barracks checks, and so one morning, gosh, it must have been 2:00 in the morning. I'm out cold, and battalion commander and my boss walk into my room. I guess I hadn't locked it. They knocked, but I was, super asleep.
Right.
And the boss came in and, warned me, using verbiage that I won't repeat here, that I better lock my door so that, whatever follow on things, don't happen to me. So you'll never forget waking up to that. I'll tell you.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, boy. Thank you very much for the warning. We appreciate it.
My suite mate there, you shared a bathroom. The rooms were connected by the bathroom. So my suite mate was Neil Lape, who now, is a colonel working at the Pentagon, getting ready to command a brigade in PACOM. So great guy, learned a ton from him. There, but there were some really fantastic times and stories that I probably won't share, that involved Neil and a couple other folks there. But
Oh, wow.
we found good times. Suffice it to say where we could. But the options were fairly limited.
Well,
Great unit though. We had a lot of fun. Had a fairly uninvolved battery commander, and it's funny. Will, I'll tell you, I probably learned more from him. In terms of honestly what I viewed as what not to do, than I did from most other folks. And I'll always say, I think you learn a lot from the really good people, and you learn a lot from the really bad people.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the ones who kind of muddle along in between, you probably don't learn as much from.
Yeah.
But this guy, like, so you talk about just operating autonomously, like that's what I did. I had zero guidance on anything. He was pretty disinterested in in the job as a whole, and for me as that confident young lieutenant, I took it and ran with it. And it was kind of a license to do whatever I thought was right, until someone fussed at me.
Right. And that's the thing to do. And thanks for showing that. That's what gets you where you are today. Do you remember a time when you looked around and you realized that you were the adult in the room, and that all of a sudden you needed to step up and make a stand? Do you remember a time like that?
Well, so in Alpha 2-1, my first sergeant started pulling me in and saying, "Hey, sir, I think the boss is about to get fired, so get ready." And he started having those regular conversations with me, which to be honest, I mean, as a really young lieutenant, was very awkward, right? And I appreciated First Sergeant, and I had a lot of talks with him, and that was great. That was Ricky Hurd. And he was awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciated him, and all the other good folks there. My first platoon sergeant. Well, it was my second, but much longer. My first one was only for about 3 months. But then Staff Sergeant Marshall, and the rest of the team there. Great team. But it's hard, as people probably don't realize in those days specifically. It's changed somewhat now, but just how much we put on new lieutenants in those days. And it's not a comparison to other organizations or expectations, right? There are, I don't say it's worse or harder than anything else, and you'll know between Patriot and SHORAD, the role of the lieutenant is vastly different. In terms of the leadership experience you get as a SHORAD officer is completely different. But in terms of what we expected those young lieutenants to do, who were often battery trainers and tactical control officers, in addition to being PLs, as really new, officers, as really new folks to the Army in general. And so I spent my first 3 months as a headquarters platoon leader, and then went right to fire control. And immediately, as this 3-month experienced guy, was the battery trainer, was the Crew 1 TCO, all this stuff. And it's, you will know as a non-commissioned officer, everybody else in the Army, right? The NCOs are the trainers, and it just wasn't
right
that way in Patriot land in those days. And we were doing ourselves a disservice, because you're putting these young folks who don't have, generally the requisite experience, in a position where they're having to train others, and it's a lot to ask, and it's a mixed bag, right? And so, and we did it, we figured it out, because we had to, and like I said, there were some really good folks, in 1-7 who were instrumental in helping to develop me and the team there. But but I look back at that and think, man, we were crazy.
Well, y'all had to. So, look, sir, at that time in the Army, we didn't have master gunners. We didn't have this institutional knowledge that we have now of people that understand how to fight the system. There were quirks. There were crazy things. We had friendly aircraft that were shot down. We had lots of things that were going on that caused nobody to want to do anything with a Patriot. It was a computer game that wasn't even fun to play, right? It was like, oh, come on, can't you give me a better interface than this?
Yeah, it looked like a 70s Atari, right?
Right. It's like, oh, come on. And so you had to interpret a whole new language. My best gunner was a World of Warcraft guy. He'd go play World of Warcraft and then go in the van, and he was, look, we were at a time and a culture and a place that your best guy in the van was also the guy that was going to be down at Dyer Street snorting cocaine on the weekends. Straight up. And so you had to figure that out. And what you talk about is critical, sir. Crew integrity, crew integrity, crew integrity, crew integrity. You got to form a team that wants to be together and then make a commitment for your country to go do this mission that you have. This is an asset. These assets that we have is confusing, right? It's confusing now. At the time, it was confusing to me, but now I see a Patriot battery and a Patriot battalion as look, it's a strategic defense weapon, defensive weapon. It is a spider arm of protection that goes out, and that is a critical asset. And so when you talk about crew integrity, when you talk about, hey, we need that specialist to say, hey, yeah, he's going to re-enlist for another couple years so we can keep this together for this deployment. Do this for your country, son or lady or daughter or whoever. And man, it means a lot. So you guys are standing in the gap, and I'm sure you preach all this stuff and you hear it all, but let me tell you, when you get that team together and you get your commo guy or gal together and you get everybody and you get all your stuff and you get your link worked out and you get your unit table 12, and there's just something to that, right? I don't have it, but I got a table 12 streamer that me and my commander hung, and we're proud of. We did that, and our team, we did that, and we talk about that a lot, and that's crucial. And we may not be in missions where we can table 12 right now. We may be too busy worrying about real missiles and doing our job. But, thanks for standing in the gap. I realize I'm talking and talking and talking, and I haven't asked you any questions. But that's okay. I'm here with Colonel Jamison, and we're having a good time. He is, the old man. Tell me, sir, about your family. Tell me about those that pray for you at night, and tell me who keeps you going. When the lights are very dim and the road is very long.
Yeah. So, man, family, means the world to me, and it's a tough balance, Will, for sure. I think. You talk about, or I was talking about, the support of my family, and that's just so critical, to what we do. There's no way that I could be here at this point, and successfully in this position and able to do a job as demanding as this, quite frankly, if I didn't have that support. So, so my wife Risa has just been there every step of the way, and every time I've said, hey, honey, I just need you to do this for me. She's come through, and she's a champ. And I mean, she'd be a champ if all she did was support me and keep the kids alive. Right. But she does so much more than that, and is actively engaged and will show up anytime I need her, and oh, by the way, works full time, as well. So, she's a hero for me. I mean, she makes it all happen. So, she's amazing. So we've been married since 2006. So actually, when I came back from Korea is when we got married. That was over the July 4th weekend. So I was coming back, leaving 2-1 and going to 2-4-3. I didn't know, when I was going to get leave. So I said, well, I guarantee I'll be off for July 4th. And we said, okay. And we did a destination thing, went to Vegas, invited, whatever friends and family wanted to join us. And that's what we did. So that was pretty cool.
Amen. Yay. That's awesome. Yeah.
And so we got two great kids now. So my daughter, Sydney, who was an R&R baby from that 5.52 deployment. So she's the one you saw in the pictures, first as a baby, and then with me deploying to Afghanistan. You know, one of my favorite photos, but also just kind of heart wrenching. You know, was her just as a little thing. You know, when I was taking off with with First Armor at the time. So I kind of went back to back there. Coming back from Bahrain, and then switching out, going over to Afghanistan. And I think the saving grace for me at the time was, she's so young, she's not going to remember, and of course, Risa, did a phenomenal job there holding down the fort. And then I came home, and, we went overseas, and then we had Cooper, so my son Cooper was the strange blonde child that you saw, in those pictures. He doesn't quite look that way anymore. Fortunately I was home, for that, because you've seen me and Risa, and he looked a little bit different. But just two great kids. Sydney's about to turn 12 next week, actually, and Cooper's 8. So they're, the funny story, but a little bit sad as you think about, deployments and the impacts on the kids. So I don't know if you know or not, but I'm getting ready to head out pretty soon. And so I actually had my pre-deployment leave last week, which was great. Just being able to pull the kids out of school for a week, just completely disconnected, no phone, no nothing. I had a phone for pictures, and that was it. But just, no stress, no thinking about work, just hanging out with the family, really, really enjoyed that. And so, the message to Cooper had been, obviously we're, getting ready to go. And so that's why, we're taking this time and taking you out of school and all that. Right. And so I come home yesterday, and Risa was right around there. And so I asked Cooper something about, how his day went, and how he had his first indoor soccer practice. And I was like, how'd practice go? And he just looked up at me like I was crazy. And I was like, why are you looking at me like that? And he said, I thought you were gone already. And it was just like, oh man, like first I'm like, geez, I'm going to tell you, we're going to have the conversation, but it was just, I felt bad because he heard, I'm going when we come back. Right. And that was how it kind of worked out in his mind. So, it was crazy. So, yeah, the family means so much, obviously. And I cherish the time I have with them. And, and it's one of the tougher things of battalion command is trying to, to take care of that relationship at the same time as, taking care of the many Sky Strikers.
Oh yeah.
It competes at times, right?
Yeah. Did you tell me you're going to go jump tomorrow?
I am.
Oh, wow. So, okay. So what's the time on target? What are you jumping out of? Combat equipment? What?
So Hollywood. And so fortunately, because we manifested today, we don't have to go in at 04 as we would have. So time on target is right around noon. And to be honest, I don't know what I'm jumping out of. I'll figure it out, when I get there tomorrow.
Is it a Stinger missile jump pack proficiency jump?
No.
Who's it with? Do you have any idea?
So most of the folks are ours, but we're still, strap hangers on.
Oh, wow.
The 82nd.
Yeah, it's got to look, being the S3 Air for your unit has got to be somebody that's entrenched in the system. Like we had guys that at Bragg were the S3 Airs that were like backdoor under the table mafia guys, right? If you were the S3 Air, you had little connections. It's just like being an S4 anywhere else, being an S3 Air, because there was a thing in the division that was valuable, very valuable, very valuable. It's called a night AJ. If you had a night AJ available, you were the buddy. Everybody wanted to be wanted to be next to you, because that was what everybody needed to get their star or their wreath, back then. So, yeah. So tell me about, going to Afghanistan and stuff. Tell me about that job.
Yeah, so I was a headquarters company commander for an infantry battalion, a light infantry battalion, and I mean, of all the crazy transitions from being a Patriot battery commander, right? That was one. It was unexpected, but Colonel D'Antona, says, hey, they're looking for commanders. Are you interested? I want you to go interview with this colonel over there. Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great. And so I went to go interview with Colonel Cavoli. Sat down with him and just had an awesome conversation. Right, just hit it off right away. And he said, I don't know where I want to put you. But I want you. And he was rushing off, to somewhere, and I ended up actually like driving him to his next meeting so we could just keep talking, right? So I had just a great interaction with him. And then, and then I get down to the infantry battalion, and, I didn't know what to expect. I think that was the biggest thing for me was, look, a leader's a leader, but I know I'm out of my element, in this, and, I'm not Ranger qualified, right? How are they going to view me? And I got some initial, looks, or I had to earn my my respect. But I was a pretty good physical specimen in those days, and and busted my tail and worked hard, and and it worked out okay. But man, it was a phenomenal opportunity. But the job was just great to get some maneuver experience, learn some different stuff, and just kind of see how some of the other side operated. And it was a completely different job between garrison and deployment, though. So if you know a headquarters company in the infantry, you got all the specialty platoons, and you push them out, when you deploy, right? So so I had the scouts and the snipers and the mortars and the fisters, and of course the medics and all that stuff. And then you go to NTC, and you go to Afghanistan, and you push those folks out, to the rest of the battalion, right? So my mentality, first going to that job was completely different, right? I knew I didn't know, everything, so to speak, like with Patriot, right? But I also knew that my focus had to be on supporting across the organization. So I took a completely different approach to that command, and it served me well. Just recognizing that I was there to support everyone else, and make sure they were successful. And I think that that kind of set the conditions for a successful command there. I had the worst first sergeant ever.
Oh no.
So I had a terrible introduction to the unit. So change of command inventories, which you talked about before, pretty important. The commander I was replacing was on convalescent leave. He had some kind of surgery, and I think he may have been, I don't remember if he was getting med boarded or not, but at any rate, he just wasn't actively there. It was a nightmare. So you talk about, usually you think you're going into a command and you're going to kind of sit back and take 30 days or whatever to observe and listen and, not change anything. Man, I had to go in changing stuff right off the bat because the supply was such a nightmare, that required immediate oversight. And I think, things like that kind of ingrained me pretty quickly, just because of that. So it was good. The first sergeant was retired on active duty, just getting ready to retire, and then everything changed when he left. I don't remember quite how long that took, but when Jeff Updike came in, man, he just made my life so much better, right?
Yeah.
It's just having that great NCO by my side who held all the the platoon sergeants accountable, and which is harder in a company like that too. The way everyone's kind of spread out. So that was great. And then getting to Afghanistan, we had, I think 6 different, cops and fobs where I had people, so I spent a lot of time moving around. I had a base defense ops center where we were. So we were in Logar province, if you know at all. It's in RC East, not too far from from Kabul or Bagram, but sort of that general area, but outside of the city. And so if you know the Tengi Valley, so our brigade had Logar and Wardak, and the Tengi Valley split that. And so it was right before we got there that you had the Chinook shot down there, which was a pretty significant event.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it was a busy area, we'll say. But I got to spend a lot of time getting around, and in addition to my duties of being fob mayor and running the BDOC, and we had the RCP, the route clearance folks fell under us. It was a beast. It was interesting. It was really interesting, but just a great experience. I had to go serve as an interim cop commander. That was interesting down in a remote area. So, I mean, I got to do a little bit of everything there, more than I ever would have expected. Yeah.
Did you find yourself in, pulling the trigger and pointing at bad guys and directing fire and cowering and helping your buddy that got injured? Anything like that?
So I found myself in positions where we were getting fired at, but never close enough to be able to identify the enemy when I was out on patrol. It was different when, we were monitoring some of our, systems that provided a little bit more fidelity of the battlefield. So sitting in the command post, watching the raid camera, talking, with the JTAC who's got, the B1s on the net, right? So in that position, yes. But out there, I remember, gosh, there was one time that was particularly crazy. We had just come back from a patrol in one of our pretty hot cops where we did have some folks get hurt. Just come back in, and I'm standing there with the CSM, and we're right by Humvee, and a round hits the Humvee, and we don't know how. There's no telling at that point how accurate that is or not, but it hits the hood right next to where we're at. And so the sergeant major goes right back out of the cop. And he, there's nobody else there. Like we're standing there after the whole patrol's come in, and I don't want to let him go by himself. I go out there with him, but it's like, what are you doing? I'm just thinking, like, I'm trying to think about what's going through his mind, but I also don't want to leave him out there on his own, right? And nothing else came of it, but it was just a sniper or whatever from long range, but we get close enough to see him. But we had some folks obviously come back not the same. The battalion lost a number of folks. I was fortunate enough. We were fortunate enough. In our company, not to have anybody killed in action, but we had some folks who were severely wounded, and we're fortunate enough to be able to fight through. And I've got one hero here, in the Bragg area who I've been able to see since we moved out here, which is awesome. So my armorer also Will, lives here, and unfortunately, right as I was leaving, so I had just changed command right before we came back, and had I not, I would have been on this patrol, and so they got they were doing a log pack mission, to one of our pretty busy cops, and there was a coordinated attack, and there were some folks who got hurt, and Will was one of them. Still with us, and still fighting, but certainly didn't come home the same.
It's interesting, the mental, emotional, and physical wounds that many of us face and deal with that you can't see all the time and you don't deal with all the time. Many of us could choose to limp every day if we wanted to, and many of us can't help but limp every day because of different things that happen. And many of us would never limp, no matter what, until they drug our ass to the grave at different times. But our wounds go beyond just our physical. They're mental and emotional. You described about having soldiers that didn't come home the same. You didn't say they got blew up and got injured. You said, that they didn't come home the same. Has there been a time where you realized about, psychological trauma and those kinds of things? It's important, I think, now that we really address it head on and talk to each other as teammates and stop hiding it like it's something we can't talk about. There's suicide is something that we got to address it head on and say, we got to look at our brother and say, will you make this agreement with me? Will you make the agreement to call 911 before you hurt yourself? Just a basic agreement. Just do that. And if you make that agreement with your buddy, then you got to remember, I made that agreement with my buddy, because you can make all kinds of excuses about it. I couldn't find the suicide hotline number, and nobody loves me, and whatever. But I'll tell you what, when you make agreements with your Army buddies, the folks that you stood in the foxhole with, and you say, I agree, buddy, I'm not going to hurt myself, I'm going to dial 911 before that happens. That's a commitment. So if you're out there listening, make that commitment with me right now. I will not hurt myself. I will call 911 before. I have that much dignity, and I'm going to make that agreement with my Army buddy right now. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. And we got to stand up for one another in a positive way, We got to love one another, and it's tough and it's hard. But as I am older now and I look back on it, I left the battalion in 2000, right? I haven't been in 3rd or the 4th since 2000. But the legacy of that battalion lives on in the hearts of the soldiers that are there, right? And our mission isn't necessarily the same. But it doesn't matter. That's that same 4th ADA that was, marching in battles in the Civil War and standing on the front line of the American forces that continue from way back when up until today. And I happen to be sitting with the current battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Matt Jamison, a hero that I know that we're spending time together, and I'm so excited. Tell me, sir, about what it was like to get selected for battalion command in our Army.
Well, I mean, first of all, it was a huge honor, of course. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion for anybody, that's going to happen, and especially, now the whole selection process has changed, and so I actually went to the very first class of the new BCAP, which is the Battalion Commander Assessment Program. And so my good buddy Kurt Pryor and I, so Kurt was XO in 1-1 when I was the 3. Didn't know him before that, from a hole in the wall. And man, we worked so well together and just became really good friends. And we said, hey, let's go. He was at HRC at the time, which is where it was held at Knox. And we said, hey, let's go and just get this thing over with, right? We went on the very first day. And so it was really interesting, as we try to make just a better overall holistic assessment, of the folks who were put in this position. And you have no idea. I mean, we're sitting there and it's 5 days, and, they try to make it, like sort of a special ops kind of assessment, just a battery of questions and, physical and mental and just kind of stressing, stuff. Right. And as we're sitting there just getting peppered with all these psychological questions and, we come back and we're like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. Right. I just don't know, and it's, and so fortunately, we were both selected, and so many of my other, friends who I've had the chance to work with, Rob Ferryman, also was there at the same time that Kurt and I were, and he's the 1-7 commander now, downrange. And Rob was my best man, and I was his. And now I'm getting ready to to go see him downrange. So it's a small world for us, but yeah, truly just humbled and honored, and it's an indication of of really all the phenomenal soldiers and NCOs and officers I've had the chance to work with who have helped me be successful all along the way.
It's neat to see, me seeing young Lieutenant Jamison that showed up at OBC, in the early 2000s. All of a sudden, you don't really look any different. You haven't aged a bit. You look like $1,000,000. You and your beautiful wife.
I appreciate that. You keep that stuff coming.
And
since I donated to make that happen.
Oh my gosh! Oh, if you're talking about donate, look, hey, formerforce.com. We appreciate all your donations. This is about really getting these stories told and trying to make these legacies. Look, folks that are the battalion commander of 3rd of the 4th Air Defense Artillery Regiment become bigger and better things later on down the road. It's a legacied position and it's a storied spot. And if you look at guys like you, right, that got 2 commands, that got pulled out of the field to get sent to overseas to Bahrain, that gets grabbed up as a young guy to be the general's aide, right? It's obvious that you are being groomed for positions of higher authority. It's cool. It's cool to watch, right? I love it. So, that actually brings me to one of my points, right? If I would, this is the first interview that I've ever been in where I actually said, you know what? I might have some advice to give this guy, right? I might, right? I'm not the old man. I was a staff sergeant in the 3rd of the 4th ADA, right? But there's a couple things that I really, I don't know. I might just put out there. So a couple things. Look at there. Got his green book. He's read it. Yeah, one, identify your superstars and tell them that you've identified them. Like, you are a superstar. Come here, and here's your special duty. Give them something to do, tangible, that benefits the team, benefits everybody, and make it visible. Hey, this is my superstar, and he's doing this for us, right? And then you're going to have other superstars. They're going to say, whoa, I want to be a superstar too. Well, you assign them another task, right? And then you identify them. And the more superstars you make, the more superstars you'll have. The key thing to that is employ your units in accordance with their capabilities. Do not give your superstars tasks that are going to confuse them and upset them and get them going in the wrong direction. Make sure that if you're going to give that superstar a task, it's something it's in their alley. Almost have them pick it, right? And then the second thing I would say, sir, is realize the important place that you are holding in history, right? But not just you, your entire unit. Your entire unit stood there like I did in 1990, I did in 1999 when we got deployed to Kosovo, like so many others did when, 89 happened and we deployed to Panama, and 93 when we went to Grenada, and all the other times we went to OEF and IF and a million deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq and all the things that happened. You, sir, are in a place in history that is storied, and books are written about it. And you have soldiers that look to you in ways that you definitely don't deserve, but in ways that we're glad that you're willing to grab that guide on in those colors and lead them forward. At one point, sir, your battalion was the most decorated battalion in the 82nd Airborne Division. Those decorations haven't gone away, right? It's still the most decorated unit that used to be in the 82nd Airborne Division or whatever. It's a highly decorated unit, and so you have a mission now that I think that your Echo Battery mission, there's no cooler gladiators anywhere in the world. Nobody is willing to do what they're willing to do with the equipment. Think about, they're trying to jump a Stinger missile out, get digital link up in the middle of nowhere with nothing else but the stuff that they've jumped in to try to get a digital picture and early warning to try to it's just crazy the things that we're trying to do. It's just nutso. And so you're men and women there in the executioner battery, and you're gonna go jump out of an airplane. You got to take a picture and send it to us. Take a little video, sir, and send it to us of the jump. We would love it, right?
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, yeah. So tell me what your thoughts are, if you don't mind, as you begin to deploy. Is there anything that's, obviously safety of your soldiers? You want to bring everybody home. You have a mission to do. OPSEC is obviously involved, and we don't want to talk about, anything like that. But tell me, overarching, you're a battalion commander deploying at the will of your country's call.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many things that go into that. I mean, obviously, you're trying to take care of your soldiers and balancing that with with all the requirements of the mission. So you got to ensure that everybody is tactically ready, proficient, at all the tasks that we're being asked to perform, downrange. At the same time, you got so many administrative things, and this is where it's so different for me. At this level, there's so many people that you're drilling down by name, trying to ensure everybody's ready to go. So on the personnel side, all the administrative requirements of that, and that all at the same time as you're trying to make sure everyone gets a chance to go on leave and take care of the families as well. So there's just there are so many competing requirements, and that to me is the real challenge. Is it never feels like everything is done. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
There's never a point where you're like, I've accomplished everything that needs to be done, and it's like, well, it's still going to be here tomorrow, and you still gotta, and now there's a lot less tomorrows right now, as you try to just tick every box and get ready to go.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's interesting, about the Sky Striker Battalion is just, being a composite battalion and having different mission sets in the same organization, that you're trying to balance. And so, Echo's doing all these different things, tying in with brigades in the 82nd and doing, rotations, and they have their own, deployment as well. And it's a completely different mission set. And so trying to, balance that and what everyone else is doing as well. It's a challenge for sure, but it's a fantastic opportunity, and for everybody, right? This is what we all signed up for, and now we get to go out and do our jobs, and focus on that, and put aside some of the garrison stuff, and just get out there and do what the Army has us here to do.
Makes me want to sing the air defense song, first to fight for the right to build. Or what was the ADA song? Do you remember that one? In the dawn's early light. Yeah, that one. Okay. It's artillery. Oh my gosh, so much great time, right? Our branch is, oh my gosh, so awesome. Do you have a feeling of bringing these traditions forward? Do you go into your conference room that Command Sergeant Major Paris Williams, in my opinion, took his heart out of, and we've made it very clear to those old guys like me, I'm doing this for us as we move. And there's so many pictures of the old guys and gals, and do you feel us lifting you up? We still, if there's a battalion out there in our air defense community that is loved over all the rest, it's got to be 3rd of the 4th, right? It's got to be.
I mean, the history, as you say, is there, and it's all around us on the walls, and there's no feeling quite like walking into the Gettysburg conference room and just seeing the history everywhere. And so, obviously, I think there's a sense, I hope a sense in everybody, but certainly a sense in me of wanting to do right by those folks and honor that legacy, uphold that and also add to it, on our own. Make our own, sort of indelible marks, on that, get our own pictures on the wall, add our own, traditions and things like that. So, yeah.
So
It's
as we
pretty
begin to
awesome.
close, yeah, as we begin to close out and get you on your way, let me put you on the spot. Just one. Who is your current superstar? Who is it that you're going to identify and make sure they know and then give them that task? Do you have a superstar out there that you know?
I've got folks of all ranks, who I've told that they are superstars. I have my own words for it, but
I love it.
There's a couple lieutenants, there's a warrant officer, and there's some junior soldiers, in that mix too. And, we started a junior enlisted leadership council, to try to invest in, some of our junior leaders and help them have a hand in, in making decisions and doing some of the things that we do. And that's something that we're going to rotate, as we get ready to deploy. We'll have some new folks tied in and figure out what the best way is to do that. But I think it's important to invest in those folks, and it's pretty awesome to see them, develop and grow along the way.
Amen. Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, I'll give you the final word tonight, sir. Thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it here on Heroes Live, presented by FormerForce.com. Lieutenant Colonel Matt Jamison, the sitting battalion commander for the Sky Strikers, by daring deeds, sir. I love it.
Hey, thanks so much, Will. I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, absolutely. There's no better place to be than the Sky Striker Battalion. So by daring deeds, we are flexible in everything that we do, and we are absolutely audacious. So we are striving to uphold that legacy. So thanks for your time. Appreciate the support.
Oh, airborne. All right, so we're going to go out of here. Let's show this little video and play us out. He's getting ready to deploy, folks.
If everything I dreamt of it was true, I take your blessings with your heartaches too. It's so easy.
One of America's heroes right here, Matt Jamison.
It's you.
Destined for great things in our country, great things in our world. A rabble-rousing kid, he tells about. Didn't know what he wanted to do. Went to a school, a college with a great mentor that took him under his wing. Showed him what he could be. And he grabbed up to that and signed up. I met him, he was young and interested and cared about what was going on, and taught him how to be a lieutenant and sent him off. Oh, look at there. Hey, Sergeant Major Albright says, my son, PFC Paul Albright, will be jumping with the Sky Strikers tomorrow. Yay, we got a picture. I saw a picture of him earlier on there getting ready to jump. Yay, okay, y'all keep your feet and knees together tomorrow. Maybe y'all could get a picture. I would love it if you could get a picture with that. That would be awesome. Oh, yeah. And Gregory Cummins says, good to see you, sir. I'll definitely keep you and your family in my thoughts and prayers during your deployment.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I remember Albright when he showed up as a young soldier, right? I remember Command Sergeant Major Albright, and now his son is going to come hang out with you tomorrow and go jump.
That's awesome.
Right. Isn't that awesome? Yeah.
Let's make this world do everything you say. It's so easy.
Look at those kids.
Make it better. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Amazing. Oh, wow. You look like a Disney family, sir. So beautiful, so amazing, so awesome. You're definitely the beast, but you're a beast in a good way. You're definitely an Army beast, and soldier, and we appreciate your service, sir. Thank you very much. How about you call your unit to attention and sign out for us?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what you want me to do there because they're obviously not here.
I got you.
But to all the Sky Strikers, by daring deeds, have a great evening. Thanks, Will. I appreciate it.
Amen. Perfect, sir. Perfect. I love you. Thank you, sir, so much. I appreciate it.
Take care.